For anybody that had any slimmer of hope left that Amon would somehow return to the clan, I have sad news for you guys. Scharhrot murdered the guy in cold blood and took its crown as rightful king of the clan.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another set review of V-BT09 Butterfly Under the Moonlight. If you haven't seen our previous set review from Murakuma, then I highly recommend you guys to check out that video, links on top right here. And otherwise, stick around as we're gonna dive straight into the cards for Dark Irregulars, as Dark Irregulars got some really good generic support card. There isn't really much to talk about, it's just good support cards for any type of archetype you might play or are just fan of Scharhrot, because that deck is arguably one of the strongest deck to date right now. So with that said, let's jump straight into the cards and see what this set has to offer for Dark Irregulars. So of course, we're going to start off with the reprint triggers, and just like the other ones, it's going to be a 1-star for me as they're just generic reprints that doesn't really do anything. Then on top of that, they also got a new heal trigger, which is Alice of Nightmare Land, which is also a 1-star as it doesn't really change anything for what we can do. Now on top of that, they also got a new draw trigger, which is Pulse Taker, and this is gonna be a 3-star for me as it adds a little bit of extra option because this is the third draw trigger the clan has access to, so it opens up some extra options. Now talking about options, we also got a brand new critical sentinel triggers in the likes of One-Eyed Succubus, and that's 5-star for me because this is a really interesting card, just like all the other critical sentinel triggers, as they open up a lot of possibilities in deck building. Now of course, a new set, probably a new starter. In this case, that's Rare Flighter or Dunus. And this is a 1-star for me because it's basically a reprint with a different name and different artwork. Now there's also a new vanilla, and in this case it's the double crit grade 2 vanilla, which is Blemish Spire. Now overall it's gonna be a 1-star, but in this case I will give it a 2-star, just because with Scharhrot this can actually be playable, as this thing can accumulate a lot of power. And to understand what I'm referring to, let's take a look at Scharhrot Vampir himself to also get a better understanding for the rest of the cards within this set. So here we have Scharhrot Vampir, and its abilities are Auto Vanguard Circle. At the beginning of your battle phase, all of your front row units get power plus 1k until the end of turn for each card in your soul. So this is basically what I'm referring to with the intro, that Amon is basically dead, as this is Amon's skill, but then on crack, or on steroid, or whatever substance Dark Irregulars is into, as this thing gives all front row units the extra power. So that's all your attacks will give an additional whatever X amount of increase. So depending on how big your soul is, your numbers can rise pretty high. So this is the reason what I said with the grade 2 double crit vanilla, that can actually do something, and it can easily be 13k, 15k, 23k, whatever, that on its own without actually a booster or extra power buffs thanks to Scharhrot Vampir. So this is already a pretty strong skill, but it's even made even worse or better depending on which side you are on with its second ability, as that effect is Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, cost counter plus 1 and stand one of your front row rear guards. If your soul has 13 or more cards, stand 2 rear guards instead of 1. So not only do you increase the power of your units, you now also have the potential to restand one of them, and if you're late game and you soul charge 13 cards, you can restand both of your front row units. So this gives a protect deck access to high numbers and potentially 4 to 5 attacks. Now this already makes it very obvious why the double crit vanilla might actually be playable to some extent, because not only will it hit for pretty beefy numbers, you could potentially restand it. But even that doesn't make the card great, because that's just a vanilla with 2 crits and 3k power. Now think of this with any other card within Dark Irregulars that is already pretty good. That makes them even better. But because this thing can restand your rear guards, cards with unattack skills suddenly can trigger those skills twice. So keep these skills in mind when we take a look at the other cards within this set, and afterwards we're gonna come back to Scharhrot Vampir and take a better look at how good this interacts with other cards and even cards from previous sets. So the first card we're gonna take a look at is a generic grade 1, which is interesting to what it provides to the clan, as we have Stone Framer, and its ability is auto when put into your soul from rearguard circle during your turn. One of your vanguards gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. I see no reason to actually play this card, because this card is a weaker version in all visible ways of Frolic Claws, which is also a great one. Yes, Frolic Claws is a 7k unit and this is an 8k unit, which you could say is better, but Frolic Claws doesn't matter where it was soul charged from. If it just was put into the soul, you will give your Vanguard the extra 10k power. And on top of that, Frolic Claws could make your Rootfin even better, and some players still play Rootfin. So I see no reason to play this card over Frolic Claws. So for that, it's going to be a 1-star. The only reason why this card is maybe interesting is for budget players, because this is a common and Frolic Claws is an old triple R. Now, the second card that we have is a great free with a protect marker, which is Gravity Core Master, and its ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, this unit gets power plus 2k until the end of your turn for each card in your soul. If you get 30k or more, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So this doubles the power of what Scharhrot provides, but sadly it only provides it to itself, and it is only workable in the Vanguard Circle. If this thing was a rearguard skill, then this thing was insanely powerful with Scharhrot. Sadly, it's a Vanguard Circle skill, so that makes it almost useless, but it could at least provide the clan with a budget boss monster, as it being really beefy and also have the potential to snipe units for free turn after turn could give you some value. So with that in mind, I will give it a 2-star rating, as it's not completely terrible. It also has the protect marker, so it is a potential budget option. Now, with those generic things out of the way, let's take a look at some soul charging cards for Dark Irregulars, which every set with Dark Irregulars needs some soul charging cards. And the first one we're going to take a look at is a great one, which is Tornado Janitor. And its ability is act on the rearguard circle once per turn, cost discard a card from your hand and soul charge 2. For me, this is a 1-star card because yes, getting soul charge 2 is fine, but it's, in my opinion, definitely not worth the discard. No way that the discard is making that soul charge 2 viable to some extent, because the card itself also doesn't provide anything else besides those 2 soul charging. So for me, it's a 1-star card. Maybe if we're back in 2018 and you needed to make your speedy NOK even faster, then this might be an option, but even then I do not see that card would actually be that great. Now, a card which is incredibly powerful is this grade 2 Demonted Executioner, and its ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks a grade 2 or greater, this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of battle. So as a Vanguard unit, it could be potentially a 14k attacker. This won't matter all that much, as in most cases your opponent would say no guard no matter what power level you come at in the early game, but could come up in maybe premium to some extent. But the main application to this skill is basically if you're up against force, you can still beat over the 10k base power, which makes it somewhat interesting and useful in that particular scenario. But the main application is through its second ability, which is Auto Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost counter plus 1, soul charge 3 cards, and if you soul charge 1 or more triggers, draw a card. So this is basically a yellow bolt on an unplace effect, which can also be used on the Rearguard Circle. That's incredibly powerful, as this allows you to soul charge very rapidly, as this is hyper soul charging, and that is something you need if you want to play with Scharhrot and want to have that skill active as fast as possible. So this is a perfect 5-star card for me, as it opens up really interesting interactions, especially with something like Yellow Bolt, right? Like, riding this thing over Yellow Bolt gives you so much soul, and the potential draw you could get off of it is so nasty, but also so magical to see at the same time. Now, another interesting grade 2 retake of a G unit, which is very beloved by Dark Irregulars players, is Deflect Vampir. And its new abilities are Auto Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When it attacks, soul charge 1, and your opponent cannot intercept until the end of the battle. So basically, unattacked soul charge is really nice. It allows you to keep generating soul charge turn after turn, and forcing your opponent to not be able to intercept might not really matter all that much in most scenarios. Could come up here and there, but it's not really the main takeaway. And with Scharhrot in the mix, you could use its skill twice in a turn, which could give you a lot of soul and really set up for your second turn if you want to go full power Scharhrot. So it could be an interesting engine that you want to play, so it's not that bad of a skill. Now, its second effect is Act from Soul, cost counter plus 1, and return this card to your hand. So for counter plus 1, and effectively Soul Blast 1, you can get this card to your hand. Now, that means you will always have access to this card, which then means you will always have access to this Soul Charge engine, which will shut down your opponent's Interceptor for that specific attack. Is that great? Not necessarily, but it's an okay Soul Charge engine, or just consistency engine, or just a value engine over time. So for that, I think it's a solid 3-star card, and might come up here and there. It's also a good budget option, as seen as it's just a rare. Now, another interesting card that we have is this Grade 3 Ostia Heater, and its ability is also ability from the Soul, as that's Act from Soul, cost +1, and discard a card from your hand. Return this card to your hand, and put up to 2 cards from your drop zone into the Soul. Now, this card itself is pretty interesting and could be used in multiple ways. It could be used as an effective rewrite target turn after turn, as you can write it, then write on top of it, use its Soul ability to put it back into your hand, and then keep rewriting. Also, the fact that it puts 2 cards in the Soul means that you will effectively go +1 on your Soul, so it could be used as a Soul Charge engine as well. And the fact that you can also choose 2 specific targets from your drop zone means you could selectively Soul Charge multiple copies of units into your Soul that can work with the Brutus engine that we've seen in the previous support day for Dark Irregulars. Now, that all in itself might sound like a really powerful card that you think, oh, I want to play this. But the problem is, in all circumstances, this as a Vanguard unit doesn't really do anything. It has no Vanguard or Vanguard Circle skills. The only thing that it does is from your Soul itself to set up certain plays. So it basically has no reason to be a Grade 3 in that extent, as that means it's a pretty dead card if you want to write it. And also, why does it then have a Protect marker, as the moment you write it, you will sit on a 12k vanilla Vanguard. So it has some potential, but at the same time, it's also not that great. So for that, I will give it a 2-star card, because I probably don't see an active way of playing this card in any strategy, but at the same time, it could be utilized in different strategies, as it can do different things and might be a key piece to a consistency engine, and not really to your main plays as a Grade 3 unit or something like that. Now, another generic card that we have, and it's going to be the last generic card that we're going to talk about, is of course the Grade 3 Searcher. And that is of course Succubus of Pure Love. Her ability to gain the additional power is continuous Vanguard the Vanguard Circle. During your turn, if 1 or more cards were put into your Soul by a card's ability this turn, this unit gets power +5k. This is basically a retrained way of Darkness, and it is really easy to fulfill Dark Irregulars, no problem, so it's probably always going to be a 13k unit, but probably not if it's your Vanguard, unless you can use another Grade 1 unit to get that condition off. So pretty good. Now, its second effect is of course what we would expect of a Grade 3 Searcher, so say it all with me in tandem. Auto Vanguard the Vanguard Circle, when placed from your hand, look at the 5 cards on top of your deck, reveal to 1 card for your mom, and then put it in your hand, shuffle your deck, and if you put a card, then discard a card from your hand. So yeah, 5-star card. I have no need to explain that what I just discussed. With those generic cards out of the way, we're going to take a look at some archetype-specific support cards that might seem as generic cards, but definitely have a role in a specific archetype. And the first archetype we're going to highlight are the cards for Dantarian himself. And the first one of those cards is this Grade 1, Deflect Sweet. And her first ability is Continuous from Soul. This card gets Grade +1. So it's a Grade 2 in the Soul. Now, that already tells you it's a Dantarian support card, because no other card within the Dark Irregulars really cares for what grades are in your Soul, except for Dantarian, as he can superior call guardians from the Soul that are Grade 2 or higher. So that means you have another card that can be superior called, so even more shield you will access to. So that's great. And her second effect is Auto Vanguard Circle. When the attack is boosted hits, if your Soul has 5 or more cards, cost count +1 and draw a card. So that's skills generic, but their continuous skill is definitely for Dantarian. So overall, I think it's okay. It's a 2-star card for me, because yes, it's extra free 10k shield you could have access to for Dantarian, but her secondary effect isn't that great. It's an on attack or on boosted hit, and on hits are not that great in general, and just for counterblast drawing, that's not good enough to play. And it also means you're losing out on other Grade 1s that can set up your Soul Charge engine or ways to empower your columns with extra power. So I'm not the greatest fan of this card, but could be placed in an Dantarian deck to just increase the raw shield output of the deck. Now the second Dentarian support card is another grade 3, which is Flap Fixer, and its abilities are Continuous on Guardian Circle. If you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, this unit gets shield plus 10k. So once again, a grade 3 with 10k shield. Same as with Number of Terror that could get that extra shield power. Now its secondary effect is Auto on Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. When placed from hand, search your deck for up to 1 grade 3 card, put it into your soul, and shuffle your deck. So this card allows you to then forcefully put another copy of himself or whatever grade 3 into the soul that could be extra shield value or maybe a combo potential with Dentarian. And with how Dentarian works, by soul charging a grade 3 forcefully means that you can empower your column. So this not only sets up more shield for Dentarian, but it also gives your columns more power. So a nice consistency bump to whatever Dentarian wants to do. Now, is this the most amazing support card? I'm not 100% sure because we also have Number of Terror, which already fulfilled the same roles as this card does. But it's a nice budget option as seen as Number of Terror as a double R, and with how Scharhrot works out, the chances are that that card is gonna rise in price. So yeah, it's a nice addition for that. So I'll give it a 3-star card rating as, yeah, it's neat. Now we get to another grade 3, which isn't for Dentarian, but is for Brufus. As here we have Inflict Stamper, and her ability is Continuous on Rearguard Circle. If 3 or more Inflict Stampers are in your soul, this unit cannot retire by card effects and get critical +1. Now with Brufus you can easily fulfill this condition. And because she cannot be retired means you will always have a target, which gives Brufus 12k power and 2 extra criticals. And with Protect 2 that could increase the power even more. Now this card is very similar to another grade 3 which we had in the Brufus set, as that was Rigger Twister. It had the exact same skill, but instead of getting double critical, it gained a lot of power. So now you have the option to give Brufus more criticals or just a bunch of extra power, which is actually pretty interesting as it gives the deck in a budget realm more options to choose from and more interesting things you can decide to do with the deck or which direction you want to take it. So I think it's an okay card. It's not that amazing. It's definitely pure budget alternatives, so for that we'll give it 2-star card, because outside of that budget specific build for Brufus, which is a VR nonetheless, I think it doesn't really see any actual competitive play or whatever can be used. Now that card concludes the specific archetype support cards, so let's talk about 2 interesting cards that does something within Dark Irregulars which we never really seen before. As we have this grade 2 Exact Rosen, and her ability is Auto on Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost Counterblast 2 and call up to 1 grade 2 or less card from your soul to the Rearguard Circle. So now we're calling cards from the soul to the Rearguard Circle. So we're now actually becoming Soul Paladin. The name that was given to Pale Moon now will given to Dark Irregulars. Now that's an interesting skill because it's basically effectively a weaker superior call from what Royal Paladin does, because first we need to get the card into the soul and then we can superior call it out of the soul, which is already not that great. But on top of that, it costs 2 counterblasts. 2 counterblasts. That was overcosted at the beginning of the reboot. But now we're 3 years in and we get something like this. Like, this is definitely a 1-star card. This is not good at all. It's just terrible. And could be done better. So let's look at a card that does this a little bit better. Because here we have the main triple R grade 3 Abominable 1 Gilded Array. And Gilded Array has the abilities Auto Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. When placed, cost Counterblast 1 and call a grade 2 or less card from your soul to the Rearguard Circle. So it has the exact same skill, but it costs 1 Counterblast instead of 2. It still is not great because it has the same problem that instead of Royal Paladin where you can just superior call whatever is in your deck so you have access to all your cards, you first need to soul charge it and then you're able to superior call it. So you don't have consistent access to all your pieces. But Gilded Array also has something else that can work in its favor, as its second effect is Auto Vanguard and Rearguard Circle. When it attacks a Vanguard, if your soul has 10 or more cards, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So on top of that, you can also snipe units off your opponent's field for free, which is pretty nice. And in combination with Scharhrot, you can do that twice, as you can resend it and attack again, so you can snipe and retire something again. So it can be a nice way to clear your opponent's field. So with that free retire, on top of the fact that it could potentially superior call something from the soul to set up your board or have another attacker ready, I think it's a solid 4-star card. And yes, the superior call effect is not that great, but it's just the total package that makes it a good, solid 4-star card. The on-attack retire skill is definitely pulling its weight over that superior call effect, but then again, the superior call effect could come in handy if the match is going in the right direction. Now, a card that synergizes with these two particular cards is this grade 1, Etch in the Darkness, because it has a specific skill that definitely screams those two cards, as its skills are Auto and Vanguard Circle. When placed, draw a card and put a card from your hand into the soul. So this is a nice consistency bump, as it allows you to draw 1 extra card, but instead of discarding it like normal cycles, it allows you to put it into the soul, which can definitely set up plays for future turns, which is pretty good for Dark Irregulars. Now, its secondary effect is Auto and Rearguard Circle. When placed, soul charge 1. So if you call it, it's an extra soul charge for free, which is pretty nice. If it was placed by a card's ability, counter charge 1. So if this card is placed by the grade 2 or by Gilded Array, then you get the counter charge for free on top of the soul charge you generate. And these two skills then immediately make sense, because if you use one of those two cards, you remove a card from your soul. So once it plays, you get that soul back thanks to its on-play soul charge effect. Now, if you use Gilded Array, you also immediately refunds that counterblast. If you use the grade 2, you get one of the two counterblasts back, but it still doesn't make the grade 2 great. It's still a terrible card. Now, this grade 1 is pretty handy and can be very useful in the right circumstances. But the issue is that both its skills are very, very specific. For its first skill, you need to write it, which is a very small window of opportunity. And for its secondary effect, you ideally want to have it in the soul, and then you want to superior call it out with Gilded Array. Not the grade 2. You're not going to play the grade 2. Let's be honest here. So you want to call it out with a Gilded Array, which is an on-place effect. So that means that both skills, yes, have a lot of potential, but are very limited and has a very small window of opportunity. And because of that, I can only give this card a 3-star rating, as it's not as easy to use as most other cards. It has potential, but it's not that great. Now, the final card that I want to talk about before we go back into Scharhrot is a really interesting grade 2, as here we have Prognos Dre. And her ability is Auto and Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. When it attacks, so we can proc this twice with Scharhrot, if your soul has 5 or more cards, look at the top card of your deck, you may put that card into your soul. So this card allows you to check the top card and then decide to soul charge it. Most other cards with on attack, like Dark Vampir, just soul charge immediately. You have no agency about where that card is going. So if it's a trigger, tough luck, that trigger is now in your soul and not on top of your deck anymore. With Prognos Drain, you can at least first look at the card, see if you don't mind it disappearing into the soul, and just let it rip into the soul. Either way, you're going to keep it there, and that basically turns this card into a Oracle Think Tank card that works with Dark Irregulars. So effectively, this is a revelation skill that activates on attack instead of on place, which is really good. So not only is this a good generic soul charge engine, as you can just use it as on attack, just keep soul charging, you can also use it to stack triggers for your Vanguard swings, but in Scharhrot's case, you can even use it to set up defensive triggers, as once you attack with the Vanguard, you can resend this, then attack again, and then check if it's a trigger, and if it's a trigger, you can leave it on top, and then you give the turn to your opponent, and you at least know the first card is going to be a specific defensive trigger, which is really nice. And you can, of course, play the mind games to just fake a trigger that your opponent is going to play differently around what you did or not, but that's a whole different kind of cookie to go with, so we're not going to let that out of this video. So overall, you think this card is amazing and it's definitely a 5-star card? Well, not necessarily, because there is the condition on this card that you need to have 5 or more in your soul, meaning you need to set up a little bit to make this card effective. So it can happen that you write this thing or call this thing and it doesn't do anything because you only have 4 soul. So because of that, I can only give it a 4-star rating instead of the 5-star that I want to give it, because there's just that little bump in the road that might dislocate the wheel of the car that is Dark Irregulars. I know it's a weird analogy, but I'm gonna go with it. So with that final card discussed, let's take a look once again at Scharhrot Vampir and see how powerful this card is. Yeah, that thing is broken. I mean, this card allows you to empower any unit, give it immense power, but then also restand it. It gives you 4 to 5 attacks in a protect deck, meaning you will have perfect guards to your disposal to protect against your opponent's turn, and then swing with high numbers on top of that. And that combined with the strong on-attack skills that we already have access to in Dark Irregulars, we've seen a couple in this video alone with Soul Charge Engine on top of it, or just extra power, or control options that we can destroy your opponent's field with something like Gilded Ray, is insanely strong. But there is one more card that's from the previous set that makes everything go nuts, and that's Number of Terror. That card allows you on attack to put something into the soul and then draw cards. That combined with Scharhrot Vampir being able to restand those things, you could activate that skill 4 times in one turn if you have 2 copies. That allows you to draw 8 cards on top of the Twin Drive. Meaning you could potentially just go from 2 cards in hand to 14 cards in hand while you attacked 5 times, and all those attacks probably came in for around 25k to upwards of 37 or maybe even higher. If that doesn't sound a bit too strong, then I don't know what it takes to convince you that this thing is a piece of art. And I'm not talking about the artwork. Yes, the artwork is amazing, but the skills are just as crazy. So yeah, Scharhrot Vampir, obvious 5-star, might even make it a 6-star, but I think the only reason why I don't want to make it a 6-star is because there is the potential that it breaks. Because Scharhrot Vampir, and this is also what a lot of people said once the card was revealed, it doesn't really support itself on its own. It doesn't soul charge, meaning it's completely dependent on its support cards to generate the soul for him. So if you break a little bit in the early game, it's very possible that you will do nothing on your first grade free ride. And as we all know, if your first grade free turn doesn't do something spectacular, there's a really high probability that you will lose the game. So that's the reason why I give it a 5-star instead of 6 stars. If this thing could soul charge on top of what it already did, yeah, it was GG. So definitely a really amazing card for Dark Irregulars, and I think a lot of players are very excited and cannot wait to just play this deck. If there wasn't just some kind of worldly intervention stopping us from playing this card game. And that basically concludes this set review for Dark Irregulars. As we've seen, Dark Irregulars got amazing support, and most of it lies in its VR, but even in a lower rarity among the other cards, there are some really interesting cards that we haven't seen before in Dark Irregulars. We can Superior Call from the Soul for some reason, we can manipulate the top deck for some reason, and we have really good control option, but that's really typical of Dark Irregulars, and just generic soul charging option, as well as some really nice support cards for different archetypes like Dentarian as well as Brufus. So I think there's something for any Dark Irregular players out there, so I think every Dark Irregular players is really happy with this new support wave. And with that said, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of this new support wave for Dark Irregulars. Do you think that the cards are pretty good, or did I overlook something in particular for a card? Was a particular card way better than I explained in this video, or did I highlight the card way too much and definitely overlooking the negative downside of the cards? So let me know all your thoughts and opinions about these cards in the comment section down below, and I hope to see you guys in the following set review, as we're gonna dive straight into Pale Moon for the next set review. As always, this video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Timeleap, and I see you guys in the next one.